So this event is the next episode of an event series that we have started in February last year. Firstly, we traveled to the Netherlands, and then last November, we get closer to the concept developers competition phenomenon in Vienna. And now we will discover Barcelona to find answers for the how to start a community-led housing project through a case study of La Borda Cooperative. CoHousing Budapest Association is working in the field of community living. Our members come from a wide variety of personal and professional backgrounds. We are connected through our knowledge and our fascination with different forms of cohabitation projects. Many of our members have continuously worked on co-housing related projects since 2012. With the aim of developing the Hungarian co-housing model and support the grassroots community initiations, the CoHousing Budapest Association was established in the fall of 2019 by 15 founding members, and for now we have also grown, so now we are at 19 at the moment. But why we focus today on Barcelona? That's a good question for tonight's conversation. In December, Melinda Varfi, who's also here with us today, who believes as well as the power of communities and passionate to helping them to grow, has contacted me and that she's interested about the co-housing idea and offered to organize a meeting together with one of her friends who was part of the community-led housing project implemented in Barcelona. Probably for now, you already figured out who was this friend. Yes, it was Adrià Garcia and Mateu, if I'm pronouncing it well, I hope, and who was willing to share his valuable experience tonight. Adrià is a designer and activist involved in project releasing the everyday life of transition towards planetary societies. He is founding member of Holon, a collective advancing the role of design in social transformation, with a skill set based on strategic design, design research, and service design as well. And it has decided of experience in project with organizing such as Interface Incorporation, Environment, and La Borda Cooperative as well. Currently, he is researching about the impact of design on societal transformation through policy and transition design in housing sector, with focus on housing cooperatives in a doctorate program by the University of Borda de Catalunya. So now I would like to give the floor to you, Adrià. After the presentation, there will be time for questions, so please collect them. I ask them from the audience, and you can write it in the chat box, or in the end, you can ask it in live. So thank you very much in advance, Adrià, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks a lot, Petra. So, can you hear me all well? Okay, and can you see the presentation?
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay, let's see.
Now it will be okay.
Okay.
Perfect.
So as Petra said, the idea is to have, let's say, an hour and a half together this evening. And I planned, let's say, for 45 minutes of, speaking and explaining a bit of our experience. And then Petra will be collecting questions, but feel free to write them in the chat or afterward, whatever you feel. And then we will just like have some Q&A, some conversations on, sharing doubts and so on and so forth. So I named this presentation "Building Houses to Build Community" because basically it's the claim of La Borda, translated from Catalan, and it's one of the three key ideas that I want you to, let's say, if something that sticks in your mind, to remember. Basically, I want to cover a bit the experience that we have in La Borda, which this claim comes from. Like, we build a house or a building, and the whole idea is to build a house, to also build a community, and to build the community, build the house. So this kind of reinforcing loop between communities and housing, and everything that goes beyond communities in the social sense. The second key idea is I will do like a really quick map of terminology, concepts, and so on and so forth: co-housing, cooperative housing, community housing, there's trillions of words. So just to clarify a bit, like different ways to name things and intentions, like where do we put the focus or the stress? And our approach, let's say, is frame it in the housing as a human right, and then the cooperative approach as one way to secure this human right. And then the last idea, it's a bit on also my expertise on fostering transitions. Like what I'm talking to now, it's basically a community of change makers, pioneers, leads, interested people from probably many different fields, from activists, from civil society movements, from companies, from public administration. I don't know, like you probably come from every corner of life. And if you have interest, you basically understand that what you want is to create an ecosystem to promote this type of housing. And that's precisely what we have been doing for the last 15 years. And I would say, if we put it in a nutshell, is this concept of supporting field builders and thinking in transition, like thinking that is that's a generation or two effort. If you look at Vienna or other examples of how they actually shifted the whole housing system. So these are the three key ideas, and yeah, that's the part of the world that we come from, or that we're based, the Mediterranean side of the Pyrenees. And the red dot is the Barcelona, which is the capital of Catalonia. That's Barcelona. Some of you may have been. You have the sea on one side, and then Collserola, the mountain, on the other side, and you have two rivers. So it's basically a rectangle comprised of these geographical, accidents. And La Borda, it's on one of the corners of Barcelona, and really close by like a inner city hill. It's called Montjuïc. And even closer, if you zoom in, La Borda, it's located in a, let's say, post-industrial area from the 19th century. Catalonia was and is still really hard or really strong in the textile industry. And one of these factories from the 19th century, through different things, end up being bought by the municipality, and it's where the La Borda is today. But that didn't happen just out of thin air. It happened because this space, this factory, let's say, through different waves of economic crisis through the 20th century, of the 1930s, of 40s, after the different wars, and especially in Catalonia with the civil war with Spain, the dictatorship, and so on and so forth. So the factory stopped its activity and then went into having like small workshops of craftsmen. And then in the 70s crisis, that the property started kicking off and evicting the different workers that were in those workshops. And then at that time, in the 70s, the municipality of Barcelona created a urban plan, let's say a municipal plan, to bring their different services like, I don't know, kindergarten, schools, hospitals, and things like that. And for 20-something years, nothing really happened. And as I said, this is a really huge area, and the living conditions they were pressing in the area because there was a lot of density of population. And then basically through the whole beginning of the second millennia, wave of pro-sovereignty in Catalonia, the civil society was really active. And one of the things that happened is they created a multi-platform space that was called Tic Tac Can Batlló, which is what you can see here in the picture, which was basically a platform that basically everyone was there in the neighborhood, from neighborhood associations, from squatting, from knitting, from dancing collective, from everything you can imagine was in that multi-platform. And they basically make pressure, and they made a manifesto, and they went to municipality and told them, if in 2 years, that was 2009, if in 2 years you don't follow your own words, what you have been in your plan for 20-something years, we will gonna enter into the space and start claiming what we think it's ours. And the 2 years later, basically in that time, it was a center-right government in the city. Instead of, let's say, sending police and, because that was said that they were gonna do this event, They basically, of course, agreed into giving this space a new life with this model that was called, let's say, community managed public assets. That was 2011, and fast forward a decade, because actually this summer we celebrated the 10 years anniversary. This has been by the municipality. They've been doing different studies. Now it's a factory with different spaces that holds up to, I think, almost 200 projects, from breweries to a public library, well, popular library, from different workshops. I don't know. You can imagine everything you can imagine when the space is free, because it's from the municipality and it's given to the community to self-organize and put forward projects. And the municipality of Barcelona, they made a study and they found that basically for every euro that puts in there with basically electricity, water, and renovations, it gets 5 euros of social revenue. So that's a bit like the soup in which the Borda, let's say, seeded, or the soil in which the Borda seeded. And after this 2011, they basically organized different committees or different areas of work, and one of them was housing. And instead of basically setting, okay, we're gonna build a house, what they set up to do was to analyze the housing system in Catalonia and what was lacking. And I'm not going to go into deep here. And I've been reading a bit of the context in Budapest and in Hungary, and it has some similarities. Basically, the state, not really, like, we don't have much public housing. It's less than 2%. And the main policies that the state is being promoting are private market policies, especially with home ownership. Through the different waves of, speculation, the 2008 bubble, which was especially hard here because of the whole financialization of the housing market and mortgages and so on and so forth. The result is basically that the prices are skyrocketing. These days, the bubble is on rent because all the investment funds are basically investing on rent. We know the story. It's happening in all cities around the world, so it's similar to what you experience. But basically, these people, they basically set out to think, what can we do as a civil society organizing itself? So basically, what they did is they started creating a group to look for different alternatives, and at the end of the day, I'm going to explain a bit on detail as well. But we saw that we didn't have a community-led, in this case, cooperative model that we had, the traditional in the 19th century, then in the 20th century, different cooperative models, but they were, let's say, construction cooperative, in which, the property was then individual, and that meant that you could do, construct, but then over the years, the property will end up in the market with the speculating and privatizing logics applying. So basically, they set to study different examples. I'm going to touch it a bit, and sit and start a group. So that's what we did. First, there were 9 people, and then they did a bit of work, a bit of study, and then that's where it came from. These around 50 people that from 2014 started to work together. As I said, this is Can Batlló. That's the whole area, and the house, the building, it's in one of the corners. And as I said, this has been a long project, a long process, especially because we were, let's say, the pioneers in this context in Catalonia. So we had to build the road as we walk, in many different ways, changing regulation, explaining the model, building infrastructure. Hopefully, at the end of this talk, you could see the scale of the work. That, of course, is not being just us, but the whole ecosystem that was setting of different projects that were also promoting the model and us articulating. But basically, we've been going on through different years of different work. You can see here in the left corner also with the map of the number of activities. So to see the different intensities at the beginning, during the setting phase and the constructing phase, and so on and so forth. And now, since at the end of 2018, we started living. So we celebrated the 2nd anniversary. So as I said, our references, basically, this is in Catalan, but basically it's just to give you an example of what have been our examples for us. Of course, Denmark and Germany, Quebec and France, these are, let's say, the usual suspects. But one of the key things that we also pay attention, it was Uruguay with FUCAM and FUCOBI. which basically it's a great example by the numbers, but also by the way in which they did it. In this case, with a great support from the state and a lot of mutual help. As I said, after all these years, we, let's say, synthesized a model, or let's say a characteristic of the housing model that we promote. We call it non-speculative led cooperative housing model. Of course, in Catalan it's different, but the ideas are this one. And the two key ones, it's that it's a housing model that is not for profit and that is collective property based on a kind of use. What that means is that the property of the buildings and the houses are collective by the cooperative, and the people who live there, its members, they just have the right to live there as long as they want, but they don't own anything, they just use something. So basically it's in the economic terms, it's going from the exchange value to the use value. And basically that's what it makes, let's say, that the housing as a public good, let's say, it stays in this way for, let's say, for as many years as possible. The same way that hospitals or schools or roads are understood as a commons in which the different economic activity thrives on top of it. Another key principles is that it's affordable, that it's stable over time, and it's flexible to allow it as well for contemporary lifestyles that, you change, your life changes, you go study somewhere, you have a kid, you move, you break up, whatever, So how can we promote as well this? That is community-oriented in the sense of the community participates in the governance, but also in the way of living. And that, of course, depends on each housing project, to what extent you go from private to collective living, and each project it's unique on its own. Of course, sustainability. I guess we don't have to mention that much the climate emergency in which we all are. And finally, one of the key things that is also very important for us is that it's within the social and solidarity economy, which is basically one of the key things to touch, that basically is cooperative, not for profit, some of them, and so on and so forth. So that the housing becomes a tractor, an engine for the economic development. So there were different ways of organizing with support with different technical teams, from architects to accountants to finance to service designers, in this case us, and so on and so forth. And that was the land, let's say. By the way, I'm going to be in general pretty quick in explaining things. So there, at the end, we can go in detail into different ones. So as I said, like the whole community, we participated in the project. So it was as much as possible always taking stand. That's, for instance, the inauguration of the construction, in which we soiled a box of dreams, let's say. And in this case of La Borda, there's different types of home typologies, from homes that there's one people living to another ones who are, let's say, family of adults, different adults living together. And of course, a house is not just like its shell, but there's many activities that are been doing, and especially, again, I'm going to touch it lightly, but with my cooperative, we supported as a technical team on the design of the services, like the whole shared living, which I'm going to be touching later. But there's many different things that we also plan for to happen. And this is interesting, like to make sure that we understand that it's always a continuum between the private space at home and then the community and the neighborhood, and how, when we design these projects, we make sure that it doesn't become just another gated community that builds walls and doesn't connect with what has surrounding. One of the key also strategies for the project is that usually, I don't know that well urban or housing design in Budapest or Hungary, but traditionally, at least here, you have your house and then the common areas that at the end of the day is just corridors that actually get you to your own house. What we did in the project is basically to have, of course, these two, but to make sure that the house is a bit smaller to account for community areas So that actually part of your everyday life, it happens in a socializing way. That doesn't mean that you lose, in our context of La Borda, your private space, but actually it's a bit smaller so that you have more common areas. One of the key things also that we did was at the beginning to map our, let's say, starting situation as people that were living in Barcelona more or less precariously with the current market system, from, let's say, devoting, in this case, around 50% of our incomes in average to housing, to having energy poverty at home, and so on and so forth. That was, let's say, the benchmark for different things that I was going to tell you now of how living together, let's say, help us to improve. One of the things also that we did in terms of planning the different units is to account for, as I said, the flexibility of when you are grown in a family usually, and then you keep growing, that you emancipate, you might have a partner, you might have some kids, and so on and so forth, and you end up with that. In the case of La Borda, it's an intergenerational project, so the whole project needed to account for all these dimensions of typologies of housing, but also in services. What do we need in these different life stages? The whole construction, I will touch a bit on the more technical details, but it was made out of wood. For many reasons, for speed, for cost, for environmental impact. Again, I will not touch too much, but we've been reduced. We had the high certificate in construction. We reduce energy, water, waste, and recycling of waste and CO2 of each materials. And that's been mainly through different construction costs. Here we can see another example of this construction material, which is the wood structure. And also, for instance, another key thing that we did is, as I said before, of doing the baseline in terms of mobility, and it's just a micro example, but I think it's nice how basically we manage to through different lobbying and activism to make sure that we're not obliged to build a parking under our house, because the law from 1970s in Barcelona said that you needed to have one. And based on our current lifestyle and projections of how we imagined our cities, we said that we didn't want it, both for lifestyle and climate change and all this kind of stuff, but also because of cost. So basically saved almost €500,000 by being able to, in collaboration with the Municipality of Barcelona, change the regulation that was obliging every new building to have one. Another example is that we reduce almost by 60% the consumption on heating and the housing through passive housing and different, I don't know, these are just micro things, but it's important that all these different grand visions and discourse that afterwards they are supported in reality when they get implemented. This is an example of how we've been doing different trainings of how to regulate our house so they consume less. And another feature as well of the project has been that we took a lot of work on ourselves to basically reduce cost. We've been doing the floor of the common kitchen and many different things, paintings and building stuff and so on and so forth. And that's a key thing, not just in terms of cost, but also in terms of community building, because usually all this work has been done with these 50 people gathering at least once a month in a general assembly on the Saturdays of 4 hours, and then through working groups, usually every 2-3 weeks. But usually you do office work, you sit on a table and then you talk and you do things and so that's why it's really important to have this kind of more physical, practical, more informal ways of socializing. This is one example, but also we do calçotadas, which is a traditional meal in Catalonia, and all these different things is also really important to build the group. And another key dimension also of the project is that, as I said, it's not just like let's say building a shell, but also making sure that we thought about what type of lifestyles and life we wanted to carry in this context. And if you think just as a space, what I mentioned before of the common areas, we have a common kitchen on top of the ones that we have in our own house. We have a multi-purpose space, which is what you saw in the main cover. We have, of course, the shared laundry. We have guest rooms, so that instead of having one room extra in each house that is usually empty, we have one they share, and then we have a calendar and we would just book it. We have also planned that we're going to start constructing this year a care room, like a wet with some jacuzzi and all this kind of stuff, and also some space to make massage or to care for the elders that soon we're going to start having. And then not just like the physical shared infrastructure or common areas, but also some more intangible, from the bike parking to the patio and so on and so forth, and the different terraces, or the storage, but also how we share objects. We have let's say a way to share different objects. We also have something that is also intangible but really real, which is an emergency fund for fees, especially for instance in COVID, a couple of units because of the situation lost their income. So we are able to pay for their monthly fees without the need for them to give it back. Or for instance, right now we also activated a nanny circle to support the ones who have kids, or we clean, we self-manage the cleaning of the building. So these are different examples of the let's say what we call the convivial building or the social building that is also part of the infrastructure, that sometimes it's less visible because it's the majority of its dimension are intangible. You can see here some of the pictures of we do once a week, because we started during COVID times, dinner that we by groups. Some of them cook, and then you receive the food, and so on and so forth. We take turns, we do eatings, and so on and so forth. And again, this project, all the services and the conviviality practice were designed by the community, and that's particular one of the key roles that we took as Holon as technical support team. Here are some of the examples of the houses. As you can see, are the ceiling maintain the wooden structure. Actually, this is my home when we had the pictures of the baby that was coming. Actually, these are the kitchens, which are usually there in the middle of this model of the houses. The houses are of 3 sizes. The smaller one, which in this case is of Elena, or it's 40 something meters. The medium, which is up to 60, and the L, which is up to 70 something square meters. And there's 28 apartments, and there's different distributions of these S, M, and L sizes of the buildings. This is what you can see from the front. That's interesting. I don't know if that's the front, but let's say it's from Can Batlló, from the inner park, and that's on the right is the view that you can see from outside the Can Batlló park. And it's a park that actually the municipality of Barcelona is going to start building new stuff. Basically, putting some greens, some water, new adequating it. That's the entrance in the patio, and as you can see on the left, there's a space that's the common kitchen. At that point, we still were in construction. We were already living, but doing self-construction with the common kitchen. Here on the left, you can see the multi-purpose space, which, let's say, empties the number of flats that are in the north facade and move them on the left, which is the south facade. And here, a couple of more pictures of the multi-purpose space. Now, as you can see, it's a lot of beta mindset, let's say, work in progress. The laundry, it's still open. Hopefully by the end of the year, we're gonna close it and build on top the care room. That's how you get into the houses. And as you can see in the top, it's let's say it's covered in actually using greenhouse structures. So to as I mentioned, built on the passive house technologies. So this is really beautiful, but who pays for the party? It's always the key question. What we did basically in the initial conversation with the municipality is that we managed to agree for a land lease of the land of where the building was built. That's something that is done regularly with foundations, social housing foundations from the church and all this kind of stuff. So we basically got the same fee than them. And in this case, the municipality usually they do social housing through the social housing list, and they do it through different housing developers. So in this case, they gave it the developing of this housing to the people that was going to live. And what we did is to set ourselves a construction or developer company. And what we did basically is these 28 units, we managed to put this 18,500 euros per unit. They gave us around 20% of the whole credit or housing mortgage. And then we managed to work with different financial products, from participatory titles, from housing loan, participatory loans. We got some grants. We also did different forms of collaborating members contributions, so people who become a member of the cooperative and so on. And we're particularly proud, actually, of this almost 800,000 euros, which we actually did a crowdfunding campaign that in 15 days we managed to get all these funds from the surrounding community, let's say, from people who wanted to support the project. And of course, here it's really important on the housing, on the financial structure, to mention that this was let's say, the pioneer project. So everybody in Barcelona and Catalonia, like from municipalities, from governments, from the civil society, everybody understood that it was really important that this project was a success. And that it's really important to acknowledge from the Cohousing I, which was the financial partner. Everybody really put a lot of effort to make this a success. And that was, we did a lot of work, of course, but that's really important to mention that it was really a collective, a social effort. And of course, the whole financial plan is that we, at some point, we pay back all this money. And the idea is that when we finish paying, right now, the average is around 500 euros. Just to give you an example, the average in Barcelona, it's almost the double. What we're going to do is to not stop paying. Let's say, I think it's 23 years. And that year, the whole financial plan is that we don't stop paying, but actually we keep building a fund so that at the end of the 90-year lease, we're able to not just buy, or have the funds to build another house, but in the meantime, also have funding to fund other projects. So that's one of the key things also of our model, is to be able to be committed to the replication of this project. Because one of the key things that we have really clear is that we're not doing a house for ourselves. Yes, we're going to live in that house, but it's a common good. And also we're building an infrastructure that needs to be self-replicating, because otherwise it's just a way to create privilege or pockets of privilege, which are great for people who live there, but not socially. And that's also one of the key things that we have in our projects, to be able to make sure that in every institution we contribute to the replication of this model. That's some details on the investments and the amortization. So I went really fast. So it's let's say 7-10 minutes until the end. And now I cover, let's say, the first thing of like the project in itself, the housing project, with this idea of building housings to build communities. Then into the housing, into the constant soup. By the way, I'm going to share this presentation, and you're going to have all the links of things I'm sharing and so on and so forth. Here, I linked an article, an academic article that they just did in 2009, basically trying to map a bit the whole, what they call collaborative housing field, that encompasses many different things, from housing cooperative, co-housing, resident cooperative, self-help and self-initiative, experimental of communities, communal land trusts, you name it. There's different modalities and different things that change different elements of housing models that promote, I don't know, more community or more land, or I don't know, different things. And if you look across Europe, there's different ways to call these things. In France, it's called habitat groupé. Habitat Participative in Austria, Wagrapen in Germany. Well, anyway, there's different models, let's say, of this type of housing, and that's not to say that there's one better than the other. I'm just sharing this because to give you the whole territory of different ways to approach the building of this ecosystem, and there's everyone, not just Budapest or Hungary, but any single project will at the end put their own flavor. I also did some sort of visualization from this article, which they not just capture the models and how people name it, but also, let's say, the key aspects that people studying these projects highlighted, from, I don't know, from the architecture dimension, from the commons, radical living, sharing, seniors, rural living, political expression, exclusivity. There's many different flavors that you can look when you look at this. I don't know, depending on the word that you use. We like to use cooperative housing or community-led cooperative housing. So in this general conceptual soup, I just wanted to summarize my particular view on the different general domains. One is to understand the housing as a human right, as I said, which is the one that we are really aligned. Let's say doing this thing to promote social for really poor people, or affordable for, let's say, low to middle income classes. Then another dimension to look at these type of housing projects is to have democracy at home. Let's say for people to actually be able to have the agency to decide on the infrastructure in which they live, from collective agency, cooperativism, housing cooperative, and so on and so forth. Another dimension is the intentional living, let's say, from post-cooperative practices to people who want to live extremely sustainability, from collective of non-mixed genders who want to live just on one of the genders, and so on and so forth. Another dimension is the community life. So to actually promote housing that has this more socialized dimension, from common areas to community caring practices, from the urban fabrics, developing thriving neighborhoods, and so on and so forth. And finally, there's the whole dimension of how do we build those houses in terms of the way, the technologies, and so on and so forth, but also how do we live in those houses, from home services, the CLT, which is this wood technology, and so on and so forth. So I'm just sharing this, to get some key things. And now into the final part, which is supporting the field builders, which I think is the strategy that we're following as a collective intelligence developing Catalonia on the project. I'm sharing this based on the research that I'm undergoing at the moment. So basically, we've been doing a lot of different things. Right now, there's 36 projects going on in Catalonia, in different stages, from the city group to the construction to the living. And one of the key things that we've been doing is that we've been focusing a lot of building public, but also community policies. So policies that the different entities, cooperative groups, and second degree organizations promoting this housing model are creating for the common good of the ecosystem. In this case, what you can see, it's let's say a map, a sort of an observatory for the numbers, to understand how are we doing in terms of numbers, the typology, who is living in those spaces, and doing some surveys every year to know what are we doing. This is my own research that I'm doing. What I've basically been doing is to map in the last 15 years to understand what sort of activities the different stakeholders are carrying in order to develop the whole ecosystem of the cooperative housing, community-led cooperative housing. I'm not going to go into detail now again, but you can see that basically we've been working a lot into developing a shared vision, of a shared agenda, a lot into setting the new rules for the system and the regulations and so on and so forth, and a lot into community building activities, sharing information, gatherings, debates, and so on and so forth. And of course, making projects, not just talking, but actually making projects and setting examples. Here is an example of the stakeholder map. As you can see, the majority of the players are projects that they're leaving or they're going to leave. I have mapped around 160 different stakeholders, from publics, from funding, players, from institutions, technical support teams, and so on and so forth. And they organize in different coordinating spaces, which is also really important thing, to create second structure organizations where coordination can happen, not just to lobby, but also to have interactions with the public institutions. One of the things that we've done, and again, I put the link, we've done a map of international policies to promote this sort of housing. And we basically, I'm sharing a link of the interactive tool that I created, but in the link, you will see also, when you open it, you will see a link to actually the data set from the academic study. But basically just to map, if you want to promote that, from what's the role of the different administration bodies, what sort of policies do they need to create, and then you can check in each different countries that they have, let's say, more market-oriented or state-oriented ways to understand its policies, and you can see what they have done. Another thing that we also, let's say, this kind of community, or in this case, it's also community non public structures or infrastructures. In this case, we also take part as Holon. We created a platform that just launched a couple of weeks ago to promote community learning, to basically map. We did a map of the 80-something activities that at La Borda we carried during these 6 or 7 years to make the project a reality. So we basically mapped them. What did we do and when did we do it? So to actually have a bit of like a general landscape of, if we want to do this thing, what do we need to do? If you use Google Translate, you can access usually all this content is in Catalan, so you have a Catalan friend, or Google Translate probably will help. And as I said, we basically map all these different activities and when they happen and so on and so forth. Another infrastructure or key thing that we did in this case was Parviure, which is another player doing stuff here. It's a tool that you can put let's say the criteria for the land that you are evaluating. For instance, imagine you have a couple of land lots that you're evaluating, and you know how many, how many housing units do you have, and different elements of how do you want to live, and then they basically make a calculation of the sort of cost that will get out after the whole project, both at the beginning to get the funding, like the first money that you put, that you go to the bank to get the rest of the money, and then what sort of monthly fee at the end when you're leaving you're gonna have. And what we also been doing a lot as an ecosystem, it's to generate a lot of knowledge, do a lot of studies collectively, each of them, different players doing it on their own, but then sharing it back, what we're learning about how to do this. I also put links of each of these, most of them are in Catalan. As I said, Google Translate will help you with that. From maps of different, sorry, I was drinking water. From maps of different references, such as Uruguay and Denmark, from reports on what policies could Catalonia or the municipalities develop, from how to approach co-housing for seniors, to actually how can we make Adrià Cooperative or cooperative housing inclusive, so to actually increase diversity in psychological but also physical domains. Some reports to help you find land, I don't know, different things, a book. So the different things that we're doing. And finally, I wanted to highlight two key things that we've been doing, which is basically to create these kind of spaces for stakeholder gathering and working together. The one on the left is let's say is the one from the community or the social market, whatever you want to call it, which is based on the Social and Solidarity Network of Catalonia. So we created a subgroup of that network about housing. And we basically been yearly gathering once a year in a festival. We created a principle-based vision of the model. We've been doing, as I said, different studies and so on, and sharing the learnings. we've been doing different political campaigns to lobby over land lease on election cycles with politicians, so on and so forth. We've been doing a lot of explanations of the model and so on and so forth. And then also it's been created different spaces where, in this case, especially in the city of Barcelona, where the different players also participate in conversations with the municipality of Barcelona. And they've been doing different policies, from funding lines, both at the Catalan level, but also at the Barcelona level, tax exemptions and so on and so forth. Also, the municipality of Barcelona started doing open calls for land lease, because it's one of the key barriers in the context of Catalonia to actually access land. And now this political instrument or policy now is evolved, and we basically create, instead of like an open call or a contest, a formal agreement, so that the process is faster. I don't know, as I mentioned, several regulations have been adapted. For instance, in the parking, they're facilitating as well conversations for a community land trust, which is a particular thing of land ownership between public and community and so on and so forth. So really quick, I went over 5 minutes of what I expected, but that's, let's say, let me see if I can manage to go back to, so you can see my face. Can you see my face, by the way?
Yeah. We can see your face.
Okay. So you can see both the presentation and my face. Cool.
Yes. If you stop the sharing, I think that time we can see each other, and also probably the others as well.
So now it's okay in terms of the settings?
Let's sharing. See. Yeah, now it's okay.
Super.
Yes. Okay. Wow. there was really intense, but really valuable and informative. I personally have a lot of questions, but first maybe to give the floor for the others. Yes. And as I mentioned in the beginning, you can write it even in the chat, or if you sign somehow that I have a question, please do it with the audience. Until then, I will start with the first one, which we get in the chat box. So the question is that in La Borda project, have you noticed that some of the communal spaces are not used the way you designed originally? If yes, how do you change the space or the use?
Yes, for instance, the multipurpose space is one of the, well, let me say something. So we've been living for 2 years now, so that's really low. Like it's not not low, but just few years. For if you see other projects that have been living, you can see that it takes a lot to build the community. But also, it's been like the first year that we just got in, that you are closed in your own house after, let's say, 5 years of working with these people. You just want a bit of like, okay, guys, I don't want to see you in a year. You know, I'm going to retire my own home. I'm going to be, you know, fixing whatever, putting a picture in the wall or whatever it is. And then gradually, when we started going up, you know, into the common areas, then the pandemic came. So it's been a bit strange in terms of how to build this whole community dimension, because we didn't have much time. But for instance, the multipurpose space is something that we've seen that we're using, but not as much as expected. And there's something there about expectations, and that's one of the key things about the project. In general, this thing, because it's a type of project that people go there with a lot of ideals, and I'm gonna live with my friends and all this kind of stuff. And in our experience is that you're gonna live with awesome neighbors, first of all, which some of them might be your friends. But in general, the whole expectation setting and recalibrating expectations has been a key thing. And in this case, for the space, what we've seen is that because of cost, we reduced cost, we made it that it's not really well isolated in terms of sound. So we have a street in terms of also temperature. And now we're working actually to move some of the activities that we, you know, before we didn't have it, to move it there. For instance, like kids playing, meetings, we're having some meetings there, but if it's a long meeting, we don't have it because sometimes you cannot hear it. So at the end of the day, there's a lot of, in this case, it was a multipurpose space, but it's a lot of like work in progress. And that's the only thing that we had in terms of, you know, recalibrating expectations. But it's really normal, and it's okay, fine. We planned for this, didn't go that way. What can we do about it, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. I think that's normal. Like in everyday practice, you feel that what is what was well designed in terms of usage or not, and how it's like flexible, how it's turning. Okay, let's go for the second one. How did the people come together? Who decided who gets selected for the 28 apartments?
Mm-hmm.
Really interesting question.
Yes. So as I said, and that's something that we've seen as a pattern. Usually, how it starts is by a group of, let's say, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 10 units. Who, you know, they're just like interested in the project and so on and so forth. And there's always these different, I call it floating points that as long as you fix one, the others start fixing, which is group, finance, and land. You know, these are the three things at the beginning. There is like, it's always difficult to fix it. And you start fixing whatever comes first, you know, it's just like, you just go with whatever. And then when you find a place that fixes the space and that fixes the number of people, or if you find the number of people, you move to a different space, or so on and so forth. In the case of, usually what happens is that you move and you create some sort of like a vision, something that this core group holds together that can be attractive, blurred, and not necessarily that you did, you know, detailed to the comma, but you have some sort of like flavor that can attract people and then, you know, can make it easier to collaborate, because it's also important, like, don't romanticize collaboration in the sense of, you know, we're going to all agree and so on and so forth. No, collaboration is hard. And if you are really people with such, you know, different visions, it's going to be like a pain in the ass. So it's important that you make sure that, that you ease and you attract the people that it's going to be more easy to work together. And the sense of La Borda, like this, let's say, I think there were 9 units. They created all this more or less vision, and then they basically made an open call in the neighborhood. Hey guys, we're going to be doing this. We have more or less not signed, but verbally agreed this land, which will go for 28 places. Who would like to join? And then all this, I don't know, and different people join, around 50. And then basically what we started doing together is like, okay, with this land, with this more or less between, I think at the beginning it was 28 and 31, what sort of puzzle can we make? And then a lot of like fitting. And then how, that was in the beginning. And then to decide which people, which person was in which apartment, that's a whole story.
There was a hard decision as well, that who goes for which unit?
I would not say hard. Now we will do it much easier. What we did, it was we did like a mathematical program that we evaluated all different apartments based on what you wanted. You know, you could grade all of them, and then the program gave you, it's a pretty simple algorithm. We can share it. I think it's an open source. And then basically gave, okay, the best option for everyone. And then what we did is we divided between the small and the mediums and large, and each group end up in a consensus base saying, okay, I will get this, but maybe we could, you know, change one room or things like that, because as I didn't enter too much into the architectural dimension, but the building was designed in a way that you could move different pieces and things like that.
And it was decided by the time when the plan for the house was ready. So you already know that how many houses were, which floors and everything. After that, you use this basically, this program too.
That's also important, at least in our understanding, because you allowed for everyone to design the best possible building that you could have, knowing that no matter where you live, it's going to be awesome. And the architects need to do a great work of balancing things. That's why I said, for instance, in our case, to put at least the least number of housing units on the north, so that actually could, you know, have more people on the south. I don't know, things like that. There could be many different details, but at the end of the day, it's like, make sure that you build the greatest building, and then if you pick one here or one there, it's great, you know.
Yeah. Just depends on the size, basically, that which fits for you.
Of course.
Okay, let's go for the second one. It was written by Laszlo. He said that thanks for the presentation. I see the project is not only for building the house, but community. Can you share the most successful project building the community?
I'm not sure I understand the second part. Can you share the most successful project building in the community? What do you understand? Or Laszlo, can you clarify in the chat?
Yeah, please.
And then maybe we can go for another question. In the
yeah. We go for another one till then. So the next is that how do you handle decision making with this amount of units and residents?
Yes. I don't know what your experience with self-organizing, socially with the whole liberalism, or I don't know in each context what is it, but there's this kind of myth that self-organizing is hard, and that's what humans been doing for the whole humanity of the history. So basically, it's I don't know, like it's always having in our case is having a general assembly where we basically have a time limit, and we let's say go fast. So it's not about making sure that we respect and honor everybody's time. And not getting, because that's also one of the things that sometimes people just get in love with the idea that we're doing it in this way, and then it's just doing it in this way. So it's basically just making sure. In this case, was just a general assembly once per month, where there, let's say, two key dimensions. One is more like general decisions, like we need to agree this budget, la 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 la. I don't know, color, whatever. And then another dimension, it's more debates, political debates, like what do we think about these topics? And actually it's interesting because we have a lot of contact with other groups that are now undergoing this process. And everybody has done their own ways. We've seen now that some people are doing, for instance, shorter meetings instead of 4 hours each Saturday, one Saturday per month. They're doing every 3 weeks, sometimes in the evenings, quick of 2 hours. And they basically is divided, one about technical teams, like quick stuff, one about political stuff, visioning, what do we think about this and that, expressing, debating, blah, blah, blah. And another one, a bit more emotional or socially about how we're feeling, because that's one of the key topics. I didn't mention it that much. That's also part of what we did, like supporting the group in going through this process, because it's a really hard process. It's learningful, and it's not rocket science. Everybody can, I would say, more or less everybody can do it, but it's, I would say, our cultural, I don't know how it's in your context in Hungary, but at least in Catalonia, let's say culturally, we lack sometimes the tools to go through these collective processes. And you put in a lot of your money, so it can be stressful, it takes a lot of time. So that's one of the key things also that I would like to share, at least, and that's really personal. That's not something that we discuss in La Borda. One of the key things for me when you go through this process is to understand it. I don't know, it's like doing studying a university degree. It's like 3 or 4 years that you're going to go through a process full of learnings to value it just for what it is, which is, doing your housing project. And most probably you're going to have a house at the end, which is going to be awesome, cheaper, with other people, and so on and so forth. But the process in itself needs to be valued, and making sure that you allow yourself for, committing, but also taking the time to not overburn yourself. That's important. People have different tendencies. Some people, lay down, others put a lot of energy. So to be able to have good communication and spaces for that, it's one of the key things that in this case, we did it. For instance, we did emotional mass, but as I mentioned, another project that I know, they do this kind of one technical, one visioning, and one emotional.
Mm-hmm. If we go for the second one, I think it's related to this one as well. Who is part of the General Assembly? Each person, one person per unit, different number of persons based on the unit size. How is that going?
Yeah. It's per person, but of course, let's say we are 40-something adults, and the average participation, I think, is 45, 25 or 30. So it's not that all the time everyone from the same unit participates, but the idea is that it is, and of course, that's one of the things as well that we, again, it's dynamic. It's like growing a garden. You cannot force a flower to grow, and you need to approach it. And participation is one of these key things. You cannot force anyone to participate, but the project needs everyone to participate. And to be able to have different strategies, I could share the ones that we have. We usually, for instance, every once in a while, we do a participation survey to see how everybody's feeling. What task are you doing? Do you feel that you are able to carry it all? I don't know. Each group finds their own way, but that's one of the things that we did in this case. And then you have the General Assembly, but you also have working groups that I went a bit fast, but you have the communication group, for a lot of, communication to doing lobbying and things like that. The legal group, the architecture, the administration, the economic, and the conviviality group in this case. And then people also, work on these small groups, which tend to be 5 to 8 people, let's say. And then they carry more like the everyday work.
Is it like mandatory to the people to be part of one of the working groups, or is it? Yes. And
again, it depends.
And it's mandatory to be in one, or is it like to be part of in one group at least, or?
Yes. Let's say it's mandatory, but again, we're not gonna force everybody. But it's mandatory to attend to the assemblies, and it's mandatory to participate in one of the working groups. And of course, as I said, if you just had a baby, you're not gonna, or if you go into a life crisis, or I don't know if your mom it's just being able to, one side to not over romanticize this, and another side to not just like, expect everything to be done, because the whole point of this, at least in our model, is that you engage in this, because both you're going to learn, you're going to be able to decide how is your life in the future with your house, but also it's going to be cheaper, because if somebody else does it, they're going to not just charge you, but put the benefit on that, and
just be part of it and participate if you are in the okay, I think Laszlo gives some other comments and extensions. So he meant what kind of common interested program groups you have been able to organize, how it is working recently. That's his question.
Vale. Okay, so I understand what you mean by interest program groups. Maybe it's what I mentioned right now, like how we organize internally. As I said, we have these general ones that I just mentioned, like communication, conviviality, economics, legal, and administration, and architecture. Legal and administration are sometimes funded, but basically, I have one of the first slides that you can see how the different organizational dynamics change. And one of the key things that we learn is that it's not that important. I mean, I can give you mine, and it's great that is a frame, is a reference that you have. But from the experience that we see when we talk with all the different projects, they all have their own way of organizing. But one of the key things that we learn is it's really important to be able to manage two things. First is to be able to, in each of the different phases, that the organization keeps changing, because you're going from a group that is thinking and imagining what they're going to do. Then you become a developer. Then you become a community who's living together. And in between, there's all these different transitions. So as an organization, you need to be alive and changing the way you organize. So that's why one of the key things that we see in ourselves is that we check a lot on like, okay, groups, what are you doing? What are your plans for this year? Or do you think you have too many people, or are you actually lacking people? Like all these different check-ins in between are really important. And again, that's just, I would say, organizational culture of self-management, which probably all of you know from different contexts in the Scouts or at work or different, but in our context, that's how it works. And another key thing that we also manage is there's something about the speed or the metabolism in which the project advances that is what's also really key in terms of organization, because for some people we're going really slow, and for some people we're going really fast, and a lot of it might be for how they're feeling with their own life project, what sort of workload do they have, but also could be about I don't know, housing pressure, because that's the thing. One of the key things that I would say, let me say this way, I didn't mention it before, the main ingredient in my understanding for this project to succeed is people needing a house. It seems pretty obvious, but there's something that keeps you, that keeps you coming to this place. But yeah, that's really key. And anyway, but what I was going to say is that your housing situation can be, you need to have some sort of stable, or not stable, because during the project of La Borda, I changed 3 times of house, while we were building it. Mm-hmm. So that also affects your sense of speed and need. So to keep this thing of like making sure that you allow for people to adapt to the pace is also really important.
So it's like flexibility and resilience is like key factors in it, I guess. Mm-hmm. Okay, let's go for the next question. So I think, yes, what principles have you used in group meetings, and what about conflict? Who has facilitated them, the community or an external person?
Yeah, as I mentioned, that fell into our community group. Committee or working group. It was the conviviality committee. And actually, because of my personal experience, professional experience as well, I was part of this conflict management resolution processes. We have different strategies that we've been following, from preventing conflict resolution with promoting a culture of active listening, of being able, for everybody to, respect when somebody's speaking. I don't know. Sometimes you can think that it's common sense, but of course it's not common sense. But active listening. Just give me a second.
Okay.
So yeah, like basically these things. And what we've done as well is when different conflicts had arose, because we had, let's say 2 or 3 conflicts, we promoted is to actually have to build capacities internally with all these different cultural things and so on and so forth. And in some small contexts, we actually invited people to support us first with trainings of like having basically sharing things like what is rank, power, privilege, I don't know, notions about power dynamics, so that everybody built an understanding of how that reproduces within each human group. And then also we got support to facilitate conflicts in which they were of intensity, let's say, and we weren't able to manage it. And in this case, we basically just hired people who work on that things. And it's important to put it into the table that everybody has conflict, like every human group has conflicts, or we call it, let's say, you can put it as creative tensions if you want. The most important part is not to have conflict, because they're going to arise, tension going to arise, but how do you handle it? And then you make sure that you understand it as a way, to notice something that is going on, and that you can build it and go forward. And just to mention that I need to be sharp at 19:15 to leave the call, which I think is what we agreed, no?
Yeah. Just 19:15 you meant, yes? Yeah, yes, okay. Yes. So maybe in this case, I will try to check it that we have time like for last question. Could you please mention a successful project, which was rather top-bottom project? We have just started a project for elderly, and we are discussing with the investor the possibilities of benefits of co-housing for elderly.
Yes, in our case in Barcelona, most of the projects are being community-led. There's some examples, but I will not refer to one in Catalonia, but I will refer to one in Italy, that it's called Ceni di Cambiamento. I will put it here in the chat, Ceni di Cambiamento.
Yeah, sure.
Cohousing I. It's the foundation that is working in Italy. And they did different projects. That it's basically the foundation who creates a project and then looks for the community. So understand that it's a top-down approach, and it's been pretty successful in, let's say, creating a thriving community, because that's always the challenge. If you start with the investment, with the, and then bring the people, sometimes it's hard to build all these dynamics, because it's not easy that you share a common kitchen with somebody you don't know. And that's a really important thing. But of course, that's why it's important that no matter who leads the project, that as much as possible the community comes, to take part, not just to the site, but actually to build the bonds between the community.
Yeah, in case for maybe for last question, what would be your advice for us, for example, as an association here in Hungary? So for the CoHousing Budapest, we are focusing now on promoting and knowledge transfer and mentoring, forming groups, but we organize events like today. But what can be our next step? How we can support the process? Yeah.
Yes, I can share the experience that we had in Catalonia, which is really, I don't know, paradigmatic, but I think it's always fun to tell. We had, let's say, a group that was called Sostra Civic, that they basically focus on creating a lot of reports and, you know, raising awareness and so on and so forth. And they managed to, they started in 2004 and they were, I don't know, until they were almost 15 years raising awareness. Mm-hmm. There was a guy who started and so on and so forth, and let's say La Borda, at the beginning when they were establishing, they went to Sostra Civic and they find that it was hard to, you know, to move forward. So what had happened is that they ended up creating it on themselves, not with the support of this Housing association, something like you know. And there's always, we see in the context of Catalonia, there's these two souls, let's say, like the ones who started by sharing, you know, spreading the word, thing like that, and the ones who were like doing it without sometimes thinking too much, but with a lot of course, detail and so on and so forth. And I think these are two really important, I would not say competing, but actually complementing strategies to advance, to actually set the space for the thing to get known, you know, dissemination, everything you know it. Mm-hmm. And also you need this kind of whatever type of personalities that is like, we're going to do this. Like having the example, it's one of them that basically, if you look at how the whole field developed during the years there was dissemination and the years after the first project came, the curve just like went exponential because you see it tangible. And it's not just like what could happen, but actually, even if it's imperfect. And as I mentioned, La Borda in this case, it was the pioneer example that if you really are able to build it as guys, this is let's say it's the test field. I don't know what you want to call it. It's the case study, you know. So we need to invest on this. Then a lot of people can pool resources and see the importance of strategically. Also, everybody wants to be in the pioneer, you know. So from companies to public bodies, something like that, they all want to support the one who did it in the first time. So it's also, in my understanding, really important to go into the let's do one.
So basically have like a living example in the country as well, and that will do themselves for that. Okay, it's a shame that we have no more time for that, but thank you very much. I really would like to say a big thank you for you, Adrià, for your inspiring presentation and inspiring answers as well. We gain a large amount of information we gained today. I think we got closer a bit about participative design process and how it works in real life. I also would like to say thank you for the audience. I hope you will be able to use the knowledge what we gained today. We are curious about your experience, so please share it even in the Facebook event. And don't forget to follow us on our platforms for interesting contents. We are planning to continue this kind of discovering events and travel to another countries as well. As we have mentioned in the beginning, the event is recorded and we will share it with you soon, also in our YouTube channel. And if I got it right, Adrià, you will send the presentation, maybe that will be shareable with the audience as well.
Yes, I just put it on the chat.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for you especially, and thanks for Melinda as well to make that connection. And we really appreciate your willingness to do this. Thank you very much. And thanks for the audience as well. Bye. Bye for all.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.